Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Ahmed with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. Pakistan says India has buried the concept of secularism due to its extremist Hindutva policy. In a statement, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said Indian minorities and the protesting farmers face discrimination. Qureshi further added Islamabad will continue to support the right to self-determination of the innocent Kashmiris. The Indian opposition has urged the government to shed arrogance and repeal the farm laws. The main opposition party, Congress, has also called on the Supreme Court to intervene. Meanwhile, the 7th round of talks between the farmer leaders and the government is expected to take place today. As the farmers' protest enters 39th day, they have threatened to intensify the agitation if their demands are not accepted. United States President Donald Trump has pressured Georgia's top election officials to find enough votes to overturn his defeat in the state. Trump told this to Republican Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger in a recording released by the U.S. media. Vice President-elect Kamala Harris calls Trump's words the voice of desperation and an abuse of power. Joe Biden won Georgia alongside other swing states, winning 306 electoral college votes to Trump's 232. The U.S. has reversed its plans to pull out its aircraft carrier USS Nimitz from the Middle East. In a statement, the U.S. Acting Defense Secretary Chris Miller says they halted the redeployment over Iran's latest threat. Miller said the aircraft carrier will now remain on station in the U.S. Central Command area of operations. The global number of coronavirus cases has crossed 85 million, with more than 1.84 million deaths. Pakistan has confirmed the presence of 2 cases of new virus strain as its death toll stands over 10,000, while the government has announced phase-wise opening of educational institutions from January 18th. The US has registered over 351,000 COVID-19 deaths and more than 20.6 million infections so far. And in cricket, New Zealand trailed Pakistan by 11 runs with 7 wickets remaining at stumps on the second day of the second test in Christchurch. Kane Williamson and Henry Nicholls are currently unbeaten on 112 and 89 runs respectively. Earlier, the Green Shirts were bowled out for 297 runs. The Kiwis are leading the 2-match series 1-0. These were the headlines. News in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. We'll start from Pakistan, which says India has buried the concept of secularism due to its extremist Hindutva policy. In a statement, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said Indian minorities and the protesting farmers face discrimination. Qureshi said Pakistan exposed Indian terrorism in a dossier put before the world community. The Foreign Minister said Islamabad will continue to support the right to self-determination of Kashmiris. He added Pakistan has urged the United Nations for fair trials of the political prisoners in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Kashmiris across the world will observe the Right to Self-Determination Day tomorrow. The United Nations had adopted a resolution on January 5, 1949 that pledged a free and impartial plebiscite. Ahead of the day, senior Hurriyat leaders urged the United Nations to fulfill its pledge and grant them their rights. They said the world and the UN maintain a criminal silence on Indian atrocities in Kashmir. They asked the world rights body to probe the 1993 Sopore massacre in which 57 civilians were killed by Indian forces. They said Delhi's evictions of Kashmiris from their homeland proves that they want to seize the territory. Now, the Indian opposition has urged the government to shed arrogance and repeal the 3 farm laws. The Congress also called on the Supreme Court to intervene as custodians of the Constitution. Congress President Sonia Gandhi urged the democratic government to care for the dead and the protesting farmers. She said the government seems to be securing the profits of a handful of industrialists. Meanwhile, the 7th round of talks between the farmer leaders and the government is expected to take place today. The farmers have been protesting for the last 38 days around Delhi, demanding the repeal of 3 farm laws. Struggling in the bitter cold, farmers plan to hold tractor march on January 6 and January 26 if their demands are not accepted. Now, the U.S. has reversed its plans to pull out its aircraft carrier USS Nimitz from the Middle East. In a statement, the U.S. Acting Defense Secretary Chris Miller says he halted the redeployment over Iran's latest threat. Miller said the aircraft carrier will now remain stationed in the U.S. Central Command area of operations. He said no one should doubt the resolve of the United States. Earlier, Pentagon announced the withdrawal of the carrier, reversing last month's plan to keep it deployed in the Persian Gulf. Recently, tensions have spiked in Middle East as Iran repeatedly vowed to avenge the killing of top Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. Meanwhile, 9 Syrian soldiers have been killed and 8 wounded in an ambush on their convoy on a main highway in the central Syrian desert. Eyewitnesses say the soldiers were attacked near Wadi al-Azib in the western part of the desert. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack so far, which is the second such incident in less than a week. Earlier, ISIS militants ambushed 3 military bases, killing 28 soldiers in eastern Syria. Meanwhile, Syrian media said 6 civilians have been killed in a terror attack in Syria's Al-Jazeera region. It also said several civilians have been kidnapped from the Al-Kasrat area in the Al-Raqqa city. Now, Turkey says its security forces have neutralized 4 terrorists of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in northern Syria. The Defense Ministry says the militants were trying to infiltrate the Operation Peace Spring Zone. It said the terrorists aim to disrupt peace and security in the region. The ministry said operations against the militants will continue. Moving to Niger, where the death toll from terror attacks in 2 western villages has risen to 100. Authorities say the gunmen who attacked civilians arrived on around 100 motorcycles. Prime Minister Rigi Rafini confirmed the toll as he visited the attack site near the border with Mali. However, the officials are yet to identify the perpetrators. The United Nations has also condemned the attack, saying Niger has been hit hard by rising extremist violence in the Lake Chad Basin. The deadliest attack in Niger's recent memory occurred on the day initial results of the presidential elections were announced. In the Central African Republic, United Nations peacekeepers have repelled attacks by rebels on the city of Bangassou. In a statement, the UN mission said 5 militants were killed in the clashes. The mission said the shooting ceased, but the situation remains tense in the city as peacekeepers continue to robust patrols. It secured the camps for internally displaced persons and evacuated 2 wounded soldiers. The mission said it holds rebel groups and former President Francois Bozize responsible for the violence. It said recent attacks were a bid to disrupt the presidential and legislative elections before, during and after the polls. Now, Nancy Pelosi has narrowly been re-elected Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. She is the only woman to have ever served as Speaker and led the House for 17 years. The House voted 216 to 209 to reinstate Pelosi after Democrats lost 11 seats in the November 3rd elections. 5 Democrats chose not to support her. 2 voted for the Democratic legislators who were not running, while 3 others simply voted present. Meanwhile, in the Senate, Vice President Mike Pence swore in 32 senators. The oath was administered in pairs due to COVID-19 restrictions. Senator Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said the new Senate was convening at a challenging time. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump has pressured Georgia's top election official to find enough votes to overturn his defeat in the state. Trump told this to Republican Secretary of State Brad in a recording released by the U.S. media.
Georgia's Republican Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger cemented his status as an unlikely hero for U.S. Democrats following a fresh clash, in which he rejected President Trump's claims that his election defeat was a result of widespread fraud. Trump returned the former businessman to the limelight when he called Raffensperger to badger him to find enough votes to reverse Biden's victory in the state. Raffensperger is heard replying that Georgia's results were correct. The White House declined to comment. Vice President-elect Kamala Harris has called Trump's words the voice of desperation and an abuse of power. Harris was addressing an event in Georgia to seek support for Democratic Senate candidates ahead of Tuesday's consequential runoff election. Meanwhile, 10 former U.S. Secretaries of Defense have said the military should play no role in President Trump's efforts to block the transfer of power. The group, including Mark Esper, said the time had come to accept that the Republican president had lost the election. Joe Biden won Georgia alongside other swing states, winning 306 electoral college votes to Trump's 232.
Now, the global number of coronavirus cases has crossed 85 million, with more than 1.84 million deaths. The U.S. has registered over 351,000 COVID-19 fatalities and more than 20.6 million infections so far. More on coronavirus in this report.
Hospitals around the world, even in most developed states, are struggling to keep up with surges in COVID-19 hospitalizations. Over in Europe, France has announced to vaccinate 26 million of its people by the summer of this year amid the wide criticism of Paris's lagging rollout program. Germany and Norway are likely to extend the national lockdowns to curb coronavirus infection rates that are still running high. Meanwhile, the UK is set to roll out the biggest immunization program in its history with the initiation of administration of Oxford's vaccine. However, despite the hopes of tens of millions of vaccinations roll out over the next 3 months, Britain is still likely to face even tougher period.
What we're doing clearly is grappling with a new variant of the virus, which is surging particularly in London and the southeast, and that's why we've had to take exceptional measures for some parts to close primary schools, keep primary schools closed temporarily.
Over in Latin America, the regional number of cases has exceeded over 15.7 million, with the worst caseload registered in Brazil. Meanwhile, U.S. experts also contradict with the President Donald Trump's claims that number of COVID-19 cases and deaths is far exaggerated in U.S., as compared to other countries that report purposely very inaccurately and low. Over in Asia, the vaccination for people in higher infection risks has been in full swing in the Chinese capital of Beijing since the program started on January 1st.
We have launched the COVID-19 vaccine dispatching platform and the inoculation management platform, docking them with Beijing Health Kit application to enable the two platforms to share data. Those who have received the initial dose could find their status on the Health Kits inquiry section, updated to first dose received. The status will be updated to vaccination completed when they've received the second dose.
Meanwhile, Japan is considering to declare a state of emergency for capital Tokyo and 3 surrounding prefectures as their cases climb. India's approval of domestically produced COVID-19 vaccine has been facing criticism over lack of required efficacy data. India has reported over 16,000 infections and 214 deaths in the past 24 hours, taking its toll to 149,000.
Pakistan has confirmed the presence of the new coronavirus variant among 2 individuals who had visited the United Kingdom. In the past 24 hours, 39 people have lost their lives to COVID-19, taking the death toll to over 10,350. According to the National Command and Operations Centre, all inbound passengers from the UK are required to be tested for the virus on arrival. Meanwhile, the government has announced phase-wise opening of educational institutions from January 18. The health officials reported 1,895 new infections overnight. More than 35,000 active COVID-19 cases have been detected in the country. The Health Ministry says out of over 488,000 countrywide cases, more than 442,000 people have recovered. More news coming up in this bulletin after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, the United States Congress has passed the Malala Yousafzai Scholarship Act, expanding the number of awards available to Pakistani women. The bill now heads to the White House for President Donald Trump to sign into law. The act mandates that at least 50% higher education scholarships to women in Pakistan from 2020 to 2022. Among other things, it requires the U.S. Agency for International Development to brief Congress annually. Since 2010, U.S. aid has given more than 6,000 awards to Pakistani women. This Pakistan-based scholarship bill expands this program. In 2014, Malala was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in recognition of her efforts for girls' education. Now, Afghan government and the Taliban representatives are set to meet tomorrow to resume the power-sharing talks. The Ministry of Peace Affairs said both teams are determined to take the process forward. The ministry said the dialogue is a complicated process, but the interests of the Afghan people is their prime focus. The government has blamed the Taliban for the recent clashes and string of high-profile murders. The group has rejected the accusations but also made gains on the ground while fighting against the government forces. The US and European officials have urged both sides to reduce hostilities and move quickly towards a negotiated settlement. Moving on now, the Hamas movement has called to hold a comprehensive Palestinian dialogue as soon as possible. In a televised address, Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh said his party is ready to engage in legislative and presidential elections. Haniyeh urged the Fatah organization to put an end to bilateral disputes with Hamas over holding general elections. He stressed that Palestinians should agree on specific strategy of resistance that may help them gain their legitimate rights. Earlier, Haniyeh also sent a letter to Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas to show Hamas's willingness to end the internal division. Abbas welcomed Hamas's decision of ending division, building partnership and accomplishing a national unity. Now, a British court will decide on the extradition of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to the US today. If deported, Assange will face charges including espionage over the release of secret US military documents. In a closing statement to the judge, Assange's legal team said the prosecution was politically motivated. His lawyers say if extradited and found guilty of espionage, Assange could go to prison for 30 to 40 years. However, prosecutors say he will face no more than 63 months in jail. The U.S. legal team also said that federal prosecutors are forbidden to have political opinions. Today's ruling is likely to be appealed to London's High Court, and the case could go to the United Kingdom's Supreme Court, further delaying the outcome. Now, in India, the death toll from the roof collapse incident has risen to 23 in the Ghaziabad district of northern Uttar Pradesh state. Rescue officials said 21 people were injured in the incident, while 38 others were rescued. They said around 100 people were attending a funeral at the site when the roof caved in. Local media says a heavy downpour during the day may have caused the incident. Now, China's securities regulator says New York Stock Exchange plans to ban 3 Chinese telecom firms are political. Earlier, the New York Stock Exchange said it will delist the companies to bar UN investment in 31 firms with alleged ties to the military. In a statement, the regulator said the delisting completely disregards the rights of investors and market norms. It said the total market value of these firms is very small and they will handle the impact. Meanwhile, the Chinese telecom said they had not received any delisting notification. Now, ties between the US and China are restrained due to President Donald Trump's hardline stance against Beijing. Moving on, Azerbaijan and Russia have discussed economic, energy and agricultural cooperation in 2021. Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexei Overtchuk called on Azeri President Ilham Aliyev in Baku. The Azeri state media reported both leaders expressed confidence that bilateral relations will continue to expand. It said despite the coronavirus pandemic in 2020, the economic ties of both countries have advanced. It stated that the talks hailed the successful development of friendly relations based on strategic partnership. The Russian Deputy Prime Minister convened President Vladimir Putin's greetings to the Azeri president. Now, Sudan, Egypt and Ethiopia have resumed talks on a dispute over Addis Ababa's huge dam on River Nile after a month. Cape Town says it called the meeting as chair of the African Union. In a press release, the Ethiopian Foreign Ministry said it accepted a draft document by the African bloc for talks. The statement added that Sudan also accepted the document while Egypt categorically rejected it. It said most of the outstanding issues were agreed upon while differences persist on the future use of the Nile waters by Ethiopia. Meanwhile, Khartoum says the three sides will next meet on January 10th. Now in Peru, a man was rescued from his submerged vehicle as flash floods gripped swathes of Peru. The man was pulled up by rescuers after he was found stranded on the roof of his vehicle surrounded by floodwaters. Flash floods have caused extensive damage across the city of Arequipa. At least 20 properties have been damaged as a result of intense rain and flash flooding. Local authorities in Arequipa advise residents to be on alert as more rain is expected. Now in Norway, rescue workers have uncovered a seventh body from a landslide that buried homes in a village near the capital. 3 people are still believed to be missing. Rescuers say 5 teams are working hard in desperation created by the landslide. During a visit to Ask village, King Harold V called the disaster absolutely terrible and said it was very difficult to put into words. Officials said that at least 1,000 people have been evacuated from the area. Now, China has vowed to fight the tough battle against pollution in 2021. The country intends to build a carbon emissions trading market to revolutionize technology and reduce emissions. More details in this report.
China is aiming to hit peak emissions before 2030 and to reach carbon neutrality by 2060. The goal faces enormous challenges as the country's energy structure is based on high carbon energy. Officials say the Ecology and Environment Ministry is trying to formulate an action plan.
We have already initiated the work on formulating an action plan for peaking carbon dioxide emissions. We will further comply with the requirement of the central government, speed up the pace of our work, adopt more vigorous measures to control the consumption of fossil energy, and encourage the energy production of non-fossil.
Officials say they will adjust and optimize the environmental governance pattern by accelerating the shift from terminal to source governance.
We will select over 2,000 companies from some typical industries, especially the electric power industry, and allocate relevant carbon emission quotas to them in a relatively short time. We will accelerate building the support system. The registration system is in Wuhan and the trading system is in Shanghai. The first carbon emission trading order will be launched online as soon as possible.
Data shows China has carried out carbon emission trading trials in 7 provinces since 2011. 430 million tons of carbon dioxide has been traded, with a total trading volume of nearly $1.53 billion.
Now, European stocks advance on the first trading session of the new year, bucking the trend set in Asia. The pan-European stock 600 climbed by over 1%, with travel and leisure stocks bouncing 3.2% to lead the gains. London's FTSE 100 rose by 2.2% in its first day of trading, with Britain outside the European Union's orbit. Meanwhile, Germany's DAX gained 1.1% to trade below all-time highs, and France's CAC 40 was up 1.3%. Now in cricket, New Zealand trailed Pakistan by 11 runs with 7 wickets remaining at stumps on the second day of the second test in Christchurch. The Kiwis concluded day 2 at 286 runs for 3. Williamson and Nichols are currently unbeaten on 112 and 89 runs respectively. For Pakistan, Shaheen Afridi, Mohammad Abbas and Fahim Ashraf scraped 1 wicket each. Earlier, the Green Shirts were bowled out for 297 runs. The Kiwis are leading the 2-match series 1-0. And now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.